In our previous video, we talked about the great king Cadmus, the father of the Theban Empire, and how he uses his wisdom in founding his city with both form, that is masculinity, and chaos, that is femininity. Now, in this video, we will continue with the latter part of the story, which is the story of Oedipus. Generations later, Oedipus is born to the king of Thebes. An oracle says he will kill his father and marry his mother. In response, Oedipus' parents are obligated to kill him. But instead, inclined to kindness and humanity, they put an iron pin through his feet and order a servant to abandon him at the traditional place of exposure. The servant, who is a shepherd, is unable to leave the child to die and gives him to a fellow shepherd, who takes the outcast to a neighboring kingdom. The king there has no son and takes the child as his own, naming him Oedipus, which means swollen foot. Early in his adulthood, Oedipus learns of the oracle's prediction and he flees his homeland to avert the ordained fate. After wandering for some time, he arrives in Thebes, his birthplace. There, he murders a man he encounters on the road. This man is his father, and the first part of the prophecy is fulfilled. Oedipus settles in the city, but finds it in turmoil. Their king has been slain, and the Sphinx, a hybrid monster, has taken possession of the land. The Sphinx asks a riddle which no one can answer, and many are killed as the penalty of failure. Oedipus answers the riddle, saves the land from the Sphinx, and is given the widowed queen as his bride in recompense. The second part of the prophecy is thus fulfilled. The royal pair have 2 sons and 2 daughters, and Thebes is at peace for a time. In this story, we can see how fate rolls her dice again. It is decreed by the oracle that the king and queen of Thebes shall bear a son who will kill his father and marry his mother. To our view, there could hardly be a worse disaster, but remember that this is a king and a queen, and also bear in mind that this is the history of inner consciousness, containing the laws and safeguards necessary for the advent of this consciousness. The king and queen, hearing the prophecy, understandably attempt to circumvent the doom. No one wants consciousness. It comes to us only by fate, and then only if we participate in the process and pay the whole price. They injure their child by putting an iron pin through his ankles and instruct a servant to take him to the place of exposure where unwanted or crippled children are left to die. The servant cannot bear to let the child die of exposure. He gives the boy to a shepherd, who takes him to another land. Here is a kind and human act, one of the slender feminine traits that constitute the strands of fate. The king and queen of the new land have no son and take Oedipus as their own. He grows up happily. Over the years, disturbing stories about his birth arise. He finally leaves his foster parents, thinking that they are his true parents, to escape the dreadful sentence. But this act only becomes the next strand of fate. The king and queen of Thebes trying to get rid of their fated child, and Oedipus seeking to escape his fate by fleeing from his adopted parents, both of these evasions only place Oedipus exactly where he must be to accomplish the terrible and wonderful fate that was announced before his birth. The story weaves its pattern as Oedipus flees his adopted land and finds his way unknowingly to Thebes, his native land. As the gentle Oedipus enters his true homeland, he is challenged by a band of travelers and, in defending himself, kills the leader of the band. Unknown to Oedipus, this man is his father, Louis, king of Thebes. Arriving in the city, Oedipus finds Thebes under the spell of a deadly monster, the Sphinx, who has been destroying all who could not answer a cunning riddle she set before them. The Sphinx has gained power over the land because the great King Louis has been killed. Now, the Sphinx is the next stage of the feminine monster who nearly destroyed Thebes at its founding. The denied feminine has progressed from a devouring dragon to a taste of consciousness. The newcomer Oedipus is entreated to find the answer to the Sphinx riddle. Succeeding, he delivers the land from its oppression. The people appoint him to be king and give him the wife of the former king as his own. Thus is fulfilled the terrible prophecy that Oedipus would kill his father and marry his mother. Peace and harmony reign under Oedipus' wise rule for the space of 15 years. But beneath the deceptive surface lies the hideous shame of Oedipus' secret, of which he knows only part. Another tyranny overwhelms the country, in the form of drought and pestilence, for the gods cannot leave so much darkness unattended for long. Oedipus calls upon the gods to show the cause for the affliction of Thebes, and the oracle tells of the foul murder of their king Louis. It is for this that the country now lies in oppression. Oedipus vows that the one who killed Louis shall be brought to justice. A blind prophet is brought to reveal his inner vision and at first refuses to comment on what he knows. I refuse to utter the heavy secrets of my soul and yours. But after much persuasion, the blind prophet finally tells the story of Oedipus, the son of Louis and Jocasta, banished to a foreign land, returning to kill his father and marry his mother, now standing accused as king of Thebes. Jocasta is summoned and after questioning becomes aware that Oedipus, now her husband, is actually her son. Oedipus acknowledges his terrible, though unconscious acts and demands to be exiled from Thebes. Jocasta, having learned of her unwitting part in the tragedy, hangs herself, thus paying out her guilt. Oedipus, in the first flash of his own guilt, snatches the golden brooches from her dress and thrusts them into his own eyes to extinguish the sight of the wife mother, which so revolts him. By this shedding of his blood, he makes the first atonement for his incestuous guilt. Oedipus, by his own decree, is banished as king of Thebes, and Creon, the brother of Jocasta, takes the throne. To understand the tremendous impact of this story, we must firmly establish that it is an inner story and has little to do with literal fact. The tale is not about prohibition against literal incest, but is like a dream, which offers guidance and safeguards for the establishment of consciousness. Stated as simply as possible, incest is the psychological act of making consciousness. It is when we turn the flow of our instinctual energy back upon itself that we make consciousness, the ability of the self to see itself. All our consciousness is won by this means. Every time we discipline ourselves, sit down, and will ourselves to grow, we are committing incest, in an inner sense, mating with oneself. We take a part of ourselves, embrace it, and engage in the divine act of becoming conscious. This is portrayed in pharaonic Egypt in a most striking manner. Ordinary people in that ancient culture were absolutely forbidden to marry within their family under threat of immediate death. But the pharaoh was required to marry his sister. He could have no other wife. This was to force consciousness upon the aristocracy and protect the people from such a powerful experience, which they might not be able to endure. Most cultures prescribe consciousness for their aristocracy but make careful prohibition against this faculty for their common people. It is then the aristocratic part of ourselves that is destined to move toward consciousness, while the ordinary part of us obeys the basic laws and stays within conventional pattern. All introversion, that is psychological orientation which cares more about the inner life than about the external world, is incestuous, which is the reason that it is so suspect in the modern world. When you go off to meditate or simply to refresh yourself after work or community, you are mating with yourself. One stream of energy is being introduced to another stream of energy, and their fusion produces an offspring, which, like a physical aid, has the characteristics of the two parent energies, but is independent of and often superordinate to both. To engage in any discipline, to depart from the natural flow of energies, is to mate with yourself. There is an alchemical proverb: I looked at myself, I mated with myself, I gestated myself, I gave birth to myself, I am myself. This is the act of self-generation. It is an extremely dangerous activity and must be undertaken with great care, or a particularly vicious kind of destruction takes place instead of the birth of consciousness. Consciousness is an aristocratic prerogative and must be engaged in under the most careful circumstances. To disobey the natural laws of exogamous energy is permitted only to those who are destined to make high consciousness. And if this age into which we are entering can be characterized by a new consciousness, then it is not surprising that incest would be very important to that new consciousness as a metaphor for inner conscious growth. The use of incest as a symbolic act, as a metaphor for inner sight, is so new to us and our day that we are blind to this dimension of creativity. So we experience grave misunderstandings of this psychic reality. The sudden explosion of incest in its raw literal form screams at us from the media and litters our counseling offices. Never before has there been such an awareness of its pervasiveness and its growing incidence. Incest, molestation, and sexual exploitation are graphic examples of the golden touch of an emerging inner consciousness being acted out unconsciously in pathological and destructive ways. Hence, it is absolutely essential that our capacity for incest be used on its creative level, that of creating consciousness and culture. It should be safeguarded from its literal expression, which is very destructive to the human psyche. It is the cost of disobeying the laws of the natural flow of energy that is the heart and soul of the Oedipus story. The inner journey towards growing consciousness is the hero's quest. Those who make the journey contribute to the growth of a culture. Any who misunderstand or cheat, refusing or failing to pay the cost of inner growth, pay instead in the coin of loneliness, anxiety, and alienation.